Hi there, this is Heather Estes for the U.S. History class from Civil War to present day, and we had a class this week, Wednesday, April 29th, and we started a new unit within the Cold War era, the civil rights movement. I almost said Civil War, but civil rights movement. So this is going to take up at least 2 class periods for us because there is so much to talk about, and I'm excited to share that with you. So let's take a look at what we did in class. Okay, so first we started off with our interactive notes that matched the interactive PowerPoint. So the PowerPoint presentation and the notes are both on Canvas as you would find this video. This is within our modules for week 12 for Civil Rights Movement. Okay, so we did not finish these notes at all, and we were still going to be using these for next week as well. So let's get started. So it matches exactly what we learned through the PowerPoint here. So I'm going to go through it, not to every slide, but starting back to the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. There were laws called Jim Crow laws that were enforced throughout the South, enforced segregation. So we had to define segregation for us. Segregation means to separate 2 groups so that they said they would be separate but equal, but we know that that's not true. So there's a lady protesting, holding hands with the people next to her saying, "Jim Crow must go." Okay, so Southerners were able to enforce segregation, claiming it was separate but equal. African Americans and whites throughout the South had separate schools, restaurants, water fountains, and the like. So segregation means to be separated. We have 2 different groups here who are just supposedly getting the same amount of equal treatment, but it's not true. Things for the African American people, or in that time they would say colored. We definitely don't say that anymore. But they would have these signs on their end of the, turf, and it would not be as good. It would not be as clean. They weren't even allowed inside of some places, so definitely not equal treatment. So as we wrote here, it says during the Reconstruction era, Jim Crow laws were enforced throughout the South. Laws enforced segregation, to be separate. Southerners claimed that it was separate but equal, but we know now this is not true. So we'll go through our PowerPoint here. Oops, that was back. There we go. Okay. So the thing that we were looking at is, other than just African Americans, poor people were also discriminated against because they weren't allowed to vote unless you paid a tax and passed a literacy test. Meaning, this is it says color, white. This is a receipt in 1918 for voting in the area of Louisiana here. And it says you had to pay $1, and then you also had to pass a reading test. So we now know that this is wrong. In the Constitution, it does not say that you have to be able to read and write. You did not have to pay money, but you would have to do that in order to vote at this time. So that was very wrong. So in here we put poll taxes and literacy tests. So hundreds of thousands of people couldn't vote because of this time. But in spite of all that, African American culture blossoms from the early 1900s and on. So we put these different things of how they blossomed and what occurred. So, as you can see, and I really would encourage you to check out this more closely. The map here, I can't enlarge it for you now, but it basically says that there were a bunch of African Americans, that were living in the South at the time. And they decided, okay, there's more opportunity, there's less segregation, and there's less issues for us if we move away from the South. Many people had to stay there, but many people did move. They moved up into the eastern part of the United States, the Midwest, and even all the way to the west in California and other parts, just to escape that awful segregation. So we had that as the Great Migration. The next one, the Jazz Age. We had amazing art, visual art, music, dance, poetry, all kinds of things that came out of this, including people you may have known already. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington. And then including the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem is an area in New York where many people flocked to as the Great Migration, so we have a lot of African American influence here. And it celebrated the life, through story, poetry, drama, music, visual arts, and dance. So we wrote these two things here. Great Migration, we have the Jazz Age. And the third one, Harlem Renaissance. The last, Tuskegee Airmen. So during World War II, they were the first African-American pilots that flew combat missions during World War II. And discrimination was very apparent, even in the military. But things began to change because of this, because they were so successful and so great at what they were doing. Then they made some progress here. So 1941, during World War II, Roosevelt ended discrimination in all defense industries. 1948, later on, President Truman ended discrimination in the military, meaning that African American people were not to be seen as less just because of this color of their skin. Okay, so we're adding here to the timeline. The Civil Rights Movement takes place, if you can see this, between the Korean War era and the Berlin Wall and up into parts of the Cold War. So the Cold War is happening 1940s all the way into 1980s, 1991. And the Civil Rights Movement takes place right smack dab in the middle of that. So the reason why I'm talking about this, along with the Cold War era in general, as you can see, everything is happening at the same time. It's not something that we can just check off on a list. Boom, that happened, then this happened, then this. No, unfortunately, history doesn't work like that. So when we look back at history, we have to see that everything is happening all at the same time. So these might have been happening around the world. This is seriously happening at home. Okay, so a big part of that is TV. That's really influencing a lot of Americans. So television became more prominent in American households, and we asked a question here, how is the television going to change America? And we had a good discussion about this. This even goes back to our discussion about the Vietnam War and how that was the first basically televised conflict that we've had before, right into our living rooms here. People can see what's happening all around the world and at home. And that began to change people's idea of what was right and what was wrong according to the government. So they would see the segregation happening. If it wasn't in their town, in their home, in their neighborhood, they could see it around the United States and see, oh man, that's how other people have to live. We don't like that, let's change something. So it begins to change people's minds. Okay, so here was an example of how segregation began to break down, especially within schools. So if we turn the page in our notes, we looked at a very important case of Brown versus Board of Education. This was a case, along with other cases, brought to the Supreme Court in the United States. And it says in 1951, Oliver and Loyola Brown sued the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. Their daughter, Linda, had to take a bus to school for African American children, even though there was a school just a few blocks away from her home. So this brought in the idea, and we had a discussion about this. Why should it matter where you go to school? If that's where you want to go, who should stop you? You know? So the only reason why was because of the color of their skin. That they had to be separated, quote unquote, separate but equal. But that's not what was happening. They wanted to go to the school nearby. So they ended up taking this court case up with the 14th Amendment, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So they said that because she was allowed to go to any school she wanted, it didn't help her with equal protection of the law. So this actually won. It was one of the first huge segregation precedents to win in court cases. So Thurgood Marshall, another important name that you might know, represented the plaintiffs in this case, the family and the groups of the people that were involved in segregation in schools. And then it was later enforced as integration. So 1954, Supreme Court ruled that school segregation did not follow the 14th Amendment, stated that plaintiffs were being deprived of their equal protection of the laws. So now the entire country has to deal with the ramifications of this. So if we look at our notes here, Brown versus Board of Education, people wanted to go to any school, but they were not allowed because of segregation, forcing to be separate. So what were the effects of this? segregation actually became illegal. And it became illegal not only in schools, but it later became illegal all over the country in all ways. It became illegal very slowly. But because of cases like this and people willing to stand up for what they would like to do and believe in, that changed a lot of things. And we saw a very important story about this group called the Little Rock Nine. So we watched a video about this together. It says Little Rock Nine students integrate. So let me go back to my notes here. Okay, so school integration. It happened really slowly, just in the schools. It was decided that high schools would integrate first, meaning that they would start to mix groups integrate. That's what that means. 9 African American students enrolled in Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. This is in the South, where segregation is very strongly supported. So this is the school in Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, Central High School. And then this is the group, the oldest being 17 years old. These were high school students just trying to make a difference, to go to a school that they thought was better than the one they were currently going to. And they were willing to withstand a lot of pressure. So if you take a look, when African American students tried to enter the school on September 4th, students and parents protested outside of the building. Students were noticing that, even this lady just looks like has so much hatred for her. Just, there's military on the back. It's crazy. People were protesting and they didn't want them to go inside. They said, no, we don't want this. The governor of Arkansas hired the National Guard to prevent the students from entering the building. So the governor of Arkansas was even against the laws being passed. He said, no, I'm so for segregation, to be separate. No way are we going to allow this to happen. By September 24th, President Eisenhower ordered 1,200 soldiers to protect the students and maintain peace at Central High School. I don't know if you can imagine, but having a military escort in order for you to get to school based on the president's edict, that's crazy. Very difficult. The students were harassed the rest of the year. They were not allowed to participate in extracurricular activities. And then we watched an important video to go with that. But don't forget, most of these things were televised. People were able to watch what was happening at these schools and what kind of effect would this have on all of Americans. So we had to stop there because of time, but we're going to be really diving into a lot more examples like that. And I really would encourage you to go back and watch that video that includes the Little Rock Nine and what that was like for them and what it looked like on TV at the time. Next week, if you don't know this person, that's Rosa Parks. So we're going to talk about the bus boycott and how things started to really pick up. And of course, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King, the March on Washington, his I Have a Dream speech, and so on. We have a lot to cover here, and how civil rights really was a huge movement that lasted many years. Hi again. Okay, so that was just a recap of what we did in class last Wednesday. Please check out the rest of Canvas on the modules and the assignments pages, the pages that have our videos and everything you can watch. I really would encourage you to check out the rest of that presentation. Again, we're not going to finish it all until next week. So the projects that are involved with this, it includes all of Cold War and all of civil rights movement. So it's up to you what you would like to focus on. You can focus on one person, like the Brown versus Board of Education family. You can focus on the Little Rock Nine. You can focus on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You can focus on the Vietnam War, the Korean War, what it was like between communism and democracy. It's up to you. I had a student suggest that she wanted to make a PowerPoint or like a Google Slides with different pictures and video and just be able to share what she's learned through that. Or you can also create some kind of report, or you can make a collage of pictures, videos, whatever you would like to do. I'm not going to force you to make a written assignment because we are at home and I know it can be more creative than that. So anyway, if you have any questions about our project within the Cold War era, including the civil rights movement, please reach out to me and let me know. But I'm so excited to go into this movement some more with you because there are a lot of ramifications that affect us even today, right now. So I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.